Okay, thank you for this. And we can now open to the Q&A. Alexandra has a question for us. Hi, please. Okay, perfect.
Hi, hello.
Hello, hi,
Hi,
Alexandra.
everyone in the room. Hi, Nick. Thanks so much. I mean, it was so insightful. It gave me thrills really to listen to you and seeing your presentation.
Thank you.
And what stood up for me, and I don't know if it's going to be a question or just ask for the commenter from your side. So I'm sorry in advance if that won't sound as a question. For me, growing up in a communistic Poland, we have these, and forgive me to say so, so-called artists. And they weren't exactly, I was in the families that were working with underground organizations and illegal organizations. So for us, the artists were people that worked individually and were individual artists, but people who are creating this communistic propaganda art were always called just they were doing propaganda. So after listening to your presentation and after you giving this respect to people that were creating propaganda, because after all, they are creating a piece of art, that made me think it was really unfair towards those artists during communistic time, because they were never called artists by a wider society.
Yeah, no, I'd love to continue this conversation. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I think so. Speaking to Chinese artists, so it's contemporary artists in China who I sort of grew up with. I was in China in '93, and that was sort of the end of the Star Group. If you remember in China, this great, you'll have had talks on this as well. But these were artists who also produced propaganda. That's all they did. There was never any. It's the same in North Korea. There aren't artists there painting away images of the leader or this is or banners of freedom or whatever. It doesn't happen, and it didn't happen. Speaking to Chinese artists, it wasn't happening when they were these sort of what you call worker artists, as Alexandra sort of points out. They were just producing work for the state. At some point, individuals split away, and there was an amazing exhibition actually of work in Australia at the Melbourne art, not no sorry the Brisbane Art Gallery of artists where you see almost them splitting away from doing something different because it happens slowly. And so at the moment, yes, in Beijing we have artists who are, I'm sorry, in Pyongyang we have artists who are working for the state, and many of them will just be good artists, good at doing their job, and some of them will have an intellectual side and will be those artists maybe at some point who would have produced something else or could have produced something else. So I've also got a lot of these artists, young artists who left, the south of Korea to move to the north with this great dream of obviously, you can see, Lee Kuei-do and this gang, they were there to produce a new system. They didn't want to be under the Americans, under the imperial yoke, under the sort of the yoke that was linked to colonialization. So they went north, and of course, what happened to them was the reverse, which is so interesting. Again, that last piece I was showing you, what is happening in an artist's individual life when they're at home, and yet that piece of art I showed you of the girl and boy, the girl behind the tree, that's produced on a full-size canvas that was accepted. So what's going on there? So I think it's fantastic what you've opened up is, yes, they are artists with, their emblem there, Changjuk Sang Mansudae, art studio. I'm work artist. I will produce this. What else could I do, or what else am I thinking? It's one of the fascinations of being, a part of being able to sort of share that in North Korea. Yeah, it's like you say, it's not a question, it's a comment. I'd love to find out more from other artists. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Many, but I would like to start with two. I was very curious about this system that you were mentioning of the classification of artists 1 to 5. is it only based on technical skills, or the way they portray these kind of elements of the state messages? So this is the first question, and the second is that I think in all these kind of societies where the state has a lot of control, creativity somehow gets in the way, and in many fields really just kind of hidden places goes through. And I was thinking if there is like a particular element in these paintings in which there is like a form of hidden touch, because it could be like a certain flower, a certain position. So I'm very curious about that. If this Korean art developed this kind of almost hidden, elements. So
Thank you.
For the system, it's based on merit, and that does include both. So it's every year that they're marked, and I think it's actually in reverse. I think one is not the best, five is the best, and it's based on. All I know is what I've been told. It's based on both ability, but also if they produce works of art that have been. Every year there's a yearbook. I don't actually have one with me, but let's see what I've got. There's various books that will produce works that are, seen by the state. I mean, they're sort of rather dull because it goes on and on the same messaging. This one is actually just about the leaders and their brilliance and various other bits and bobs. So if a book has been in if an art piece has been in a national exhibition, they're not held every year, but they're pretty common. Or in a publication, then that will also help grade. So it's a grading system, and it seems to be that it's not just Manstay, it's also all the other studios. So Manstay is probably the studio most people would want to be to get to, and that grading starts even once you finish your degree and your postgrad. I mean, that's all quite interesting as well. So when they do live modeling, there's no sort of nude modeling. There's nudes in swimming costumes. That's about as far as you'll get. And the training is fascinating. This is the Pyongyang University of Fine Arts. They will eventually be selected there'll be a selection then of the better students will be sort of taken up and go to Manstay. And there is some transference of people. There's a lovely artist. He worked with his father up. He was a painter right up in the north, on the Chinese border. He's such an amazing artist. I could show you some of his pieces. We commissioned work with him. He was so good. His level was so high that he was taken into Pyongyang University of Fine Arts. He then went to Manstay Art Studio, and then also that meant his family could then come to Pyongyang. So it's not just you're also not just an elite within the country. If you are good, you are merited also just on your talent. Yeah. So I think that's sort of basic on that. I think what you're going to do is it like sort of Russian film, are the little motifs put in the art that are sort of perhaps against the system. And again, back to this speaking to Chinese artists, because of course this is not a conversation I can have with North Korean artists. But with Chinese artists who were painting in the sort of 70s and 80s, they weren't putting in anything sort of subtle, sort of saying, this is, I'm not for the system, and rearranging that. Russian film, yes, there was. But I don't believe, and I wait to see it. I'm sure, I would hope there would be, but I haven't seen evidence of it, and certainly not in North Korea, of anything other than, we're doing a painting and this is to exemplify the revolution.
Hi, hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have also a couple of questions, but I'll limit myself. The first one, I heard, well, you've been in North Korea since 1993. Has there been any differences between the different leaders and their approach to art? Is there any difference that you see between Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un? And also, is there any interest? Because everything that you show was very much for the public in North Korea. Is there any type of art that they do to export for the international community? Let's say that, and let's.
Great,
thank you.
So the art is has it moved on? It's moved on in terms, for example, we saw the propaganda piece. So pieces of propaganda poster in the 50s, they couldn't really capture the Korean face for the propaganda, and they went through a phase of being very pictorial posters, sort of, when I mean that, very heavily painted with a lot of detail of rice fields, people working the rice field, etc. Then that then developed to rather more of an individual stylistic style, one person delivering a strong message, almost like they were. And there's the Chosun Missile. Every month, this a Korean art magazine is produced, which criticizes work. So for example, in propaganda posters, there's a massive change, and it's basically like it's just they realize that to be good at advertising, which is what it is doing, is you have to be, one, it has to be relevant and it has to be very simple and clear. So the message, perhaps first of all, wasn't very clear, badly painted, we couldn't recognize characters. Now it's gone right up to digital people being put into, so and printed on digital, sort of part digital, part hand painted posters. So a great change in propaganda. Just the way the message is being delivered, almost like a criticism you get if you're an advertising agent. We're not getting our message across. Let's deliver it in a better, more effective way. And so that has changed. Interestingly enough, if you have a, for example, if I'm in a portrait, my face, it's an individual that you can recognize. It may not be as strong as a face that is sort of that fits in. There's a sort of toss up at the moment between putting individuals into North Korean posters, where people recognize the individual as an individual, or more of a painted piece where it's actually seen as delivering a message along more of a group piece. So that again backs to this argument of where it goes. But with propaganda, certainly there's been a change. With ink works, they tend to be the big chosunhwa. They tend to still be the same, but with maybe a more lively brushstroke. And that's certainly true. And there are new techniques that have come in. When we worked with one of the artists for Brisbane, there was he came up with a new technique to leave white spots for the snow, for example. So new techniques come in. Sonu Yong brought in new techniques. We saw the artist, the landscape artworks. So gradually, but it's more linked to theme pieces. So not so, and politics. So more composition under Kim Jong-il. It was more army first, this Songun policy. So a lot more of the soldiers working with the people, that sort of idea. And with the current leader, there's more. Is there a difference? There is slightly more what painting in of a modern style, but it's only in a respect that we're now in the modern times. The techniques are pretty similar. I could link. You can look at a piece of art now, and I can tell sort of what decade it's from. So yes, there has been, but it's gradual. I hope that sort of gives a sort of. I basically have to bombard you with 1,000 pictures and show you very slowly. But yes, there is, but nothing absolutely wow, remarkable. This is a new style. It's still very much in the academic field of art. Pieces for outside, they do show for exhibitions. They used to have them in China, but of course now with sanctions, there's very few places they can show their art. Mansley Art Studio used to produce a lot of these dioramas. The last one they did was in Cambodia for the Angkor Wat. If you ever go there, that the introduction center there to Cambodia was built by the Koreans, but it's really been limited now. They used to commission pieces. I went into a studio once and there were sort of rather lavish girls and men on sports cars, and I thought, what on earth is that? And that was a commission from China for them to paint for the American market. That probably still goes on, but in a smaller way, just because relations now between China and North Korea it's much more difficult to get things through the border. So no, there's been very few exhibitions abroad of art, and that was one of the reasons why we were commissioned to take the art for the first time, the Asia Pacific Triennial, one of the big events in the world. But no is the answer, and if it was to be shown, it would be that North Korean style. more landscapes, not the thematic works that I've been showing you. They wouldn't want to show that. That's political art. They'll show small pieces, but it'll be more landscape work, seascapes.
Johnson? Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk. And I have a question. As a South Korean artist, it was very special talk that gives me a sense of perspective. So I could not help wondering what similarities do you see between South and North Korean art, if any? If you are, I don't know if you are also interested in South Korean art, but do you see any difference or similarities between both art?
There's actually another new book. You'll be aware of this one, this big Korean art book, which is, if you want to look between both, it's quite a nice piece. This is the Phaidon piece on Korean art and the development of Korean art. I think in the forms of so we were just now looking at this work of Hong Jong-won, and there is it's a fascinating perspective. I mean, as you know, under the Japanese, the limitations of what artists were exposed to. I mean, people like Pei and Song actually went to Germany and produced work in exhibitions, also in France, and a few Korean artists got to Japan. So this is probably your root of artists who were exposed to very little under the Japanese, and that's probably the commonality. But prior to that, it's your links to landscape, how you produce landscape pieces. So that remains very strong. But the divergence where into modern art, into contemporary art, definitely did not happen in North Korea. So there have been exhibitions between North and South. I don't think we'll see those again, very sadly. I think this is a pretty firm line that's been put down now. It's fascinating. I mean, I don't know. I mean, truthful, no. I think it comes from the commonality was from those artists who were born in the between under Japanese occupation, because Korea was at least one country, and they were all exposed to the same thing. And unfortunately, artists who went north with ideas were told very bluntly, you will paint in this style, and this style will be socialist realism. And this is the beauty of these works that I've got. I've got probably sort of 500 little sketches of artists from this period who were born in the sort of 20s. And it's remarkable because there you see a commonality between artists of all the country. But no, after that, no. It would really need an academic look. I mean, yes, of course, but for example, in landscape, the just very simple techniques, the less is more, the blank spaces in the big ink works that you see, they're not always full of condensed color, etc. So there are ideas, but the actual composition is totally different. So it's another thing. There is so much work to be in, so much research to be done. So one of the reasons what I want to do with this collection that I've got is to house it somewhere and bring academics over and the public over, because also in the West we're turning towards the right wing, and although North Korea is the antithesis perhaps of our society, it's something that we need to be confronted with and to understand, because of course it's questioning. And the problem is, I've got this massive collection that I'm trying to get into the public sort of public vein, so it's exposed. So we start asking these questions, and yeah, Johnson is there's room to share. Come and have a look and write a paper on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here she is. Bingbing, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes. Hello,
Hi.
Raffaello. Hi,
Hi.
thank you, Nicholas, for your sharing the insightful lecture. It's I really respect what you do here, due to the political situations in the world right now. Lots of people, they have a bias to North Korean artists or to Asian artists in general. Could you tell us more about your plan about the art galleries? North Korean artists, please, because I'm really interested in that. Or are you planning to publish a book or something about it? Thank you, because I'd love to see more of North Korean artists. They're really fascinating.
That's
Thank you.
lovely. If anyone's interested and wants to see pieces, I'm very happy to share. If there's a specific subject, I'll dig it out. So Bing Bing, if you want pieces, just let me know. We did a couple of books which were sorry, it's just like advertising this. Uh, they're not non-academic books, but they were. This one is on North Korean graphics because there's a sort of great fun graphic style that they've got. Having said that, not telling you to the pages that are great fun, but their graphics I adore. And then there's a piece that's on lino cuts, which sort of gives a little bit. I think that's that we've seen that one before. Um, but really there's actually the other one in North Korean books on I've got those you can I don't know if you can get those online, but there are quite a few North Korean art books, but there's nothing that really gives you it's it's a difficult one because it's North Korean art is, the stuff I've shown you, the socialist realism stuff. After a bit, it's got enough. This book, for example, the one I showed you, Korean paintings of today. I mean, I think it's from the late 80s or when is it? Uh, uh, yeah, no, sorry, 1980, early 80s. But after a bit of sort of this and this and this, the same picture, the same picture, the same picture, you sort of buy, you can't. It's quite difficult to get through in one sitting. But I think this is what's interesting with the collection I've got is you've got this art, you've got this academic style, socialist realism, and then you've got these individual pieces. So very happy to share pieces if people are interested. But yeah, the whole idea is to find a space for it. And if I said I'm trying to find a space for socialist realism, that sort of makes a few people shudder and say, well, I would like to help, but perhaps it's not the way of the world. And if you mention North Korea socialist realism, you can forget any help whatsoever. It's like being handed a poisoned chalice. It's the same when we made, we do film or whatever. I mean, we're actually saved by a lovely Italian. When we shot the film Comrade Kim Goes Flying, we were saved by one Italian lady who sort of commissioned us for the film for Toronto Film Festival. It then went to Busan, but it needs sort of a break. And for the moment, with the collection, I don't have the money to create a space for it, and trying to find someone who'll host a space, of sort of 200 square meters, even if it's just to be shown for academics, is difficult because the art now, as you saw in that picture of me at home, is everywhere. It's under this bed. It's under a bed in Abruzzo. There's still a lot of it stuck in China. So it's a difficult situation trying to bring it together. But it's a significant collection of probably 2,000 artworks and at least 1,000 pieces of graphic work. So anyone with an inkling, we did try. I bought two big Capanoni in Italy, in Colle Val d'Elsa, in Tuscany, and the beautiful space to have this art. So I've got the shed, but I just sadly ran out of money. So sometimes dreams sort of come to an end. But we're trying to find a space for it and trying to get it and keep it as a collection. It's not a thing where I'm going to run off with $1 billion having sold it to some unsuspecting I was going to say American collector or something, what have you. But it's there as a. I mean, what was interesting is the pieces I collected were from the States. That they were taken out in various ways. There's quite interesting story behind that, which I won't go into. But the other pieces, the little pieces, are from families. And when I first got those, I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I actually would ask, can we have more of these? But it's very clear that the families of these artists, and this is, these artists would be their grandparents, were selling it either out of, they either kept the art because at one time they thought maybe it'll be worth something, but more likely it was very personal pieces to them. This is their family's art. This is our grandfather who was an artist. These are pieces of work the state don't want because they're little small sketches. but what are we going to do with them? But they're ours. This is my family's history, if you like. So taking their art, there is of course now no way. It's like owning a Philip Patek Life watch. This is I'm a custodian now, so they have to be held together. And this work has to be pushed together as a group, and it works together as a group. So individual pieces, maybe I would give to there's been interest in various museums around the world, but it would be very difficult to split it. I am, sadly, I've inherited if you like, an enormous responsibility.
Hi, Nick. I have just a couple of questions, simple questions. First is, how did you get so passionate about North Korean art? As somebody who is so far removed from Korea, it's always fascinating as a Korean to find wonderful foreigners in this room, especially who find so much passion and such a unique field of art, especially about North Korea, something that we don't really know about Korea. That's my first question. Second question is, if I'm an artist in North Korea now, um, how much freedom or flexibility do I have in terms of creativity? Because it's such a tightly controlled sort of field by the state in North Korea. So if I'm an artist in North Korea, let's say I can't really paint anything that I want unless it's either commissioned by the state or
Yeah.
if some
Okay.
I can't like start doing cubism and all this impressionism and other things
No. Right.
because most likely I'll be in trouble, right?
Yeah. So the first thing, I mean, I went to North Korea initially. A chum of mine was working there, and I arrived, and I really had no understanding whatsoever. I mean, and I think it was at that time the sort of China and North Korea. There wasn't that, it didn't feel that much difference. China was perhaps you could call it awakening, the dragon awakening, and there was not much movement going on in Pyongyang. But at the time of crossing over the first trip, as a foreigner, didn't really get it. I didn't understand it. It was incredible to see the art, and of course, the first things that hit you are the propaganda. Wow, this is still being produced. These propaganda posters and the art. It's that it is remarkable. And the whole city is built around and with propaganda, so that when you're inside it, it is almost feeding you. Whether it be sculptures, slogans, what have you, throughout the whole city, you're always being imbued with the revolution, if you like. And it was only when I really started falling for it was when we started filming, probably the documentaries, when we were commissioning art and working with the artists. And it's the obvious one. I mean, it's the human element. I mean, I speak very bad Chinese. I speak no Korean. So you're working with the translator, and you're bloody well hoping that there's always going to be a difference there between what you're doing and what you're saying. But it develops into relationships, which is how I managed to sort of commission art, also how I managed to collect the art. So I've also been through almost generations. So I've had friends who are for tour guides, for example, from '93, who came from, one chap came from Nampo because his wife was a Russian translator. He was so proud that his daughter had got into Kim Chek University, the second best university, industrial university in Beijing. So you hear these stories, and then suddenly his daughter is a tour guide. I'm over 30 years that's happens. So that's where the interest and the fascination comes in. I've seen a lot of foreigners in and out of Korea and been, coming into Korea for goodwill, and either themselves being sort of just saying, "All right, this is enough, I'm off," or being pushed out, or being forced out. So yeah, I've been there. I've sort of done my time there, and of course I've developed relations. And as that goes on, that's what it's based. I want to go back. I want to see my friends. And again, as we were asked questions by various other people, you want to see what's going on in the art world as you become. I'm not in any way an academic. You can tell by the way I sort of never finish a sentence, but I want to see. I want to get an understanding of how the art goes. I do. I can illustrate. I understand the sort of. I can see the art process as an illustrator myself of where it's going, and that I want to be a part of. As regards what can artists do, I think the best I can explain is probably that artist Sonu Yong, who would have started, and Che Yong Ho, that's the other artist I was trying to fix. When you see their sketchbooks, they are immensely talented. And this particular one artist at the moment, he's been featured a bit in he's had a bit of exposure in the West. His sketchbook, he just tells it. You've never seen anyone sketch. I'll try and drag up a picture if anyone's interested, but it's just alive. It's almost like it's got electricity going through him. He was brought up. This is the chap who came from Sinuiju and was very loud into Pyongyang. I think his father worked in a tractor factory, and he used to go and sketch. And his work is like this, and it's so. I've never seen. I do a lot. Used to do when we were teaching a lot of student sketchbooks, and there were some very good students, and I've seen sketchbooks from Turner and etc. This is on that sort of level to me. It's absolutely amazing his ability to craft with a pencil. So what will happen is they'll be allowed to develop their own style the older they get. If they become a merited artist and a people's artist, they do start creating their own style, their own genre, their own landscape, if you like. But it's not going to be anything avant-garde. It's going to be very much within that form. But just their use of the brush, their use of color, etc. But the compositions, sadly, yeah, I don't know what they're doing at home, and they may be experimenting at home. And some of those pictures I showed you at the end, the Kumgungsang Mountains, there are obviously people experimenting with color, and I've got several other pictures like that by different artists. They are experimenting, but it's not anything against the system. It's just experimenting. What can I do with paint as a medium? What can I do with ink as a medium, etc.
Thank you. She says, Dear Nick, would you happen to know at the Art Academy in North Korea, till what period art history do the students study? And wait, one more. And are they on a private level, maybe anyhow aware of the less academic international art movements?
So I asked this question a bit ago, and art history goes up to Impressionism. This is I need to ask this again. This is asking one artist, so I would need to go back. I've got a whole list of questions that when I get back to Korea, I've got to ask. But they basically classical art, and you can clearly see that in that sort of the chiaroscuro sort of style training. Those the old masters they'll be aware of. Right up through to Impressionism. I don't think there's anything. There's certainly I haven't seen any sign of anything what we would call contemporary art or any contemporary movement more than that. So whether pointillism and all that, you're beginning to sort of edge. That's already getting a little bit sort of out of their safety zone. So I'd need to reconfirm that, but it's limited. They won't know, for example, Dadaism or anything else, nihilism, you name any old form of art form. It ain't going to be there. And in fact, when we have taken artists and shown them pieces like Rothko. I have had work with artists where we managed to get them, and we were inviting 5 artists to this Australia show when the artists were banned by Australia, and they'd been invited by an art gallery. And this was actually a very interesting case of the Australian government banning people, culture, banning artists from actually experiencing something else, which is absolutely, this is where I think culture, I'm all, sanctions, okay, fine, but don't stop culture coming in and out. This is really big for a country that I always sort of say that it's very difficult in North Korea to have less engagement. It's not North Korea stopping it, it's us stopping it. And I find that that really worrying. I think we should have been engaging. There have been so many opportunities missing. So yeah, it's very limited in their art. No. So are they exposed to anything else? Very little. Funnily enough, in the film industry, we actually have work with the cinema there. In the film has changed dramatically because they realized they weren't making films of modern standards. So when films came over for the Pyongyang International Film Festival, if it was a popular film like Bend It Like Beckham or Sputnik was one of these Russian films, people started flocking, the black market for tickets. Absolutely, we all want to see these good films. Our films, and it was Kim Jong-un who basically said, you need to retrain. Our films aren't good enough. So we had this cinema where we were one time allowed to show foreign films, and then they just banned foreign films simply because the North Korean films weren't of good enough, high enough level. And in fact, the film we shot was the first film Kim Goes Flying to be called Entertainment. And if you look now, you can see it online. I think 24 hours, or say 48 hours, sorry, the film, or morning till dusk or something. Their new style of film has changed dramatically, so that it's exciting, it's thriller, it's got all the sort of, they've borrowed from the West, if you like, or from South Korea. In art, that hasn't happened. There aren't books coming over showing anything else modern or contemporary, as far as I know. So there is very little exposure to anything else, which is again one of the great sadnesses of not taking the artists out to sort of one of the greatest galleries, Brisbane Art Gallery, which would have shown artists something totally different. There is very little exposure, and also if you go to China now, you're not really going to see a lot. If you go around the Meishuguan there, it's that those days have also gone. So yeah, the chance of being influenced from the outside sort of very, very limited. And now that you wrap that up in sanctions and everything else, nothing else coming in. I'm not going to go in with an art book and go, here's contemporary art, etc. I could if I was commissioning a piece. And I was talking about Rothko. That was, these artists, they looked at Rothko and they just said, what is that? Because that step hasn't been made. I'm pretty sure they weren't going, God, I wish I could paint that. They were just going like, that ain't art, he's got no skill. So it's in a way sealed off from the rest of the world.
Thank you. That's it. We're running out of time. So I have to say now, class dismissed.
Thank you very much, everyone. Very kind. Gosamada. Thank you.